Real quick, everyone, before we get into the podcast, just want to give a quick shout out to my client, Ryan. He started with me about 3 weeks ago. He trains 3 times per week, one-on-one with me for an hour. And the week he started with me, he got fitted for his tuxedo for his sister's wedding. And then the other day, 3 weeks later, he went to go pick it up and he tried it on, and he actually had to get his entire tux refitted. So he went from a 40-inch waist to down to a 36 pant size, and from a triple XL shirt down to a double XL dress shirt. So it's pretty cool to see him get such great results in such a short amount of time. So I really hope this podcast helps, and please share this with a friend or leave us a review, because this could change the life of someone else. And without further ado, let's get into our podcast for today. So Danny and I are going to be wrapping up our Hierarchy of CrossFit series. So if you're just joining us, please go back and listen to episodes 41, which is our Nutrition Foundation podcast, episode 45, which is the metabolic conditioning, episode 49, which is gymnastics, episode 50, which is weightlifting. And we'll be wrapping up today with sport, and it all starts right now.
Oh, nice.
You like that?
Yeah, a little intro.
Welcome to the Pack Mentality Podcast. If you don't know me, I'm Matt Bauer, and I own Red Wolf CrossFit in Huntington Beach, California, and I've been coaching for 16 years. I created this podcast with one goal in mind, and that was to make fitness education accessible, engaging, and effective for everyone. Today, like I said earlier, Danny and I are going to be wrapping up our Hierarchy of CrossFit series. Today, we're going to be talking about sport, and this is what we'll be covering today. We're going to chat about the roots of CrossFit and kind of what the original intention of the CrossFit program was, and then we're going to move into defining what sport is. We're going to also talk about CrossFit's role in sport-specific training, and then we're going to wrap up with the sport of CrossFit. Very excited to be chatting about this one, Danny. You ready to rock and roll, buddy?
Yeah, ready.
All right, let's do it. All right, let's talk about, just kind of give some context. Let's talk about the roots of CrossFit. And CrossFit was originally designed as a General Physical Preparedness program, so GPP for short. And what that means is the ability to perform well at any and every task imaginable. So Danny, do you want to kind of give me your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the best way to think about it, right, is to be good at everything, but a master at nothing, essentially, right? So you could have the ability to do any sport or activity, but maybe you don't have a specific specialty at that sport, right? So you're not just a football player who lifts weights, or you're just a runner who does rowing and gymnastics, right? You're an A- or B+ student at everything.
Right.
100%.
So B+?
Well, B+ kind of high.
B+.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty high. That's good. I give myself that ranking.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people came into CrossFit. A lot of our listeners came into CrossFit when CrossFit became the sport. And I think it's important to note that the original intent of CrossFit was not specializing, but being ready for anything. And when I first started CrossFit, it was originally really popular amongst law enforcement and military, because it filled all the holes. Because at the time when CrossFit kind of became a disruption, we were doing like that traditional, just do bodybuilding, maybe some squats and deadlifts and bench here and there. And then we would just do cardio or aerobic work separately.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there was no training necessarily for the military tests in general, right? We were just doing some random stuff around, and I know law enforcement was kind of the same way. So we needed something that could, keep these guys healthy and in shape. And outside of, I think, West Side Barbell is the only other thing I can think of that has something that dates back to around the same time as CrossFit for GPP. Like, there's really nothing out there.
Yeah.
So we needed something that could, if you think about it, it was a way of keeping just people in shape, right? It was giving variety to things that were happening, and it was like a fun way of exercising that was going to have different modalities. Now from there, it developed into a sport. It's developed into these things, but the original roots was like, that was the mindset. It was like, how can I get, this 40-year-old soccer mom who has shoulder problems, right, ability to get more strength overhead without having to do like traditional cable work or things that intimidate her.
Yeah.
We could do it this way. And that's kind of the original mindset, and it kind of grew from that, right? Once we realized there was good applicable effects to everything.
Yeah. The original intention of CrossFit really was to have that, to be as well-rounded as possible, and to also to expose what weaknesses you had. So that's a big reason why I started CrossFit in the first place, because after my first CrossFit workout, I saw I had a huge deficit on doing anything that had higher reps or anything that had to do with higher intensity or bursts of energy for a sustained amount of time. And also my lung capacity or my aerobic capacity or cardio, whatever you want to call it, was horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, we could go forever about this one, but I just feel like in the beginning, there were things that we didn't think could go together with combinations, and we didn't think that needed to be together, whereas CrossFit decided. I think one of the original OG tests back in the day was like, could you, like, what was your front squat weight, right? Could you front squat your body weight or 1.5 times your body weight? Oh, and could you do a 5-minute L-sit? Those had to go hand in hand with one of the tests that they did. And we never thought that was a big deal until we started to do it. And we're like, yeah, this is way too hard. Right? And we realized that that correlation was really strong with one another, right? I think that's like one of the most common things. But also too, it's also meant to be like always evolving, right? Like you're never supposed to, like, the reason you're not a specialist necessarily is because if I spend a year working on gymnastics, pulling like muscle ups and chest to bars, and I only focus on that, I'm probably going to lose something on the backside. So then I'm going to have to go back and rework on it again. Like, you're always evolving your GPP and getting it stronger through those other pieces, right? Yeah.
And I love how CrossFit exposed me specifically to doing things that not were only out of my comfort zone, but different movements and different styles of doing things that really challenged me. And then that variety that it gave me and really helped me become such a better athlete for my sport at the time, which was baseball. And also it carried over just into everyday life, because I feel like I'm so balanced when it comes to fitness. Like, whatever task comes at me, I feel like I'm overall pretty much prepared for it.
Yeah. And that's what they were looking for, right? Like, be able to, not just have the ability to walk in and deadlift hundreds of pounds off the floor, but, be able to go out and run a 5K for fun with your family, right? On Turkey Day. Like, like, you should have the ability to do both. Do you want to do both? I don't know, but you definitely should have the muscular and the flexibility to go out and do these things, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the mindset.
Yeah, just have the most balanced fitness as possible between all broad time and modal domains.
Yeah.
Danny, how has CrossFit specifically changed your approach to fitness?
Oh man, how much time we got? No, CrossFit has changed a lot because, at least the mindset, because the one thing I absolutely hate is this is the way things are and this is the way things should always be, right? CrossFit is always evolving. Even over the last decade, we've had evolution of what we thought was really good to what we know now. Like in 2015, when I first walked through the door, doing ring muscle ups was like the best thing you could learn to do, right?
Oh yeah. And
doing 10 ring muscle, if you met someone that could do 10 ring muscle ups, you thought they were like the games athletes, right?
Yeah.
Now, doing 30 ring muscle ups in a class workout is very common, right?
Oh, yeah.
Fast forward that, I'm not saying that everyone can do it, but I mean, it's a very common practice, right? Like, the evolution of the athlete is getting stronger. So with CrossFit training, it's always evolving, it's always changing. And it leaves a lot of areas open to your training specifically. So you don't get pigeonholed into doing one boring routine every day. It's always working out new routines. And just when you think you have a grasp on how good you are or how good things are, things change. And you're like, oh my God, there's some kind of combination that comes out where you're like, I didn't know that was really going to be that hard. My best thought is, I think about the Open in 2016. They did, I think it was 16.1 or 16.2. It was the clean toes to bar double under ladder, right? And I was really good at cleans. I was okay at double unders, and I was sucky at toes to bar. Never thought that combination would come out until it did.
And
that was the hardest workout I did at that time. And it's still one of the more challenging. I've done that workout millions of times since then, but it's still one of the most challenging workouts I think I've ever done. And I remember that combination. I was like, who put this together? What? Yeah. This makes no sense. But it's one of those, it's always evolving the combinations that we see and understanding that we can pair these together. We should pair these together. We should do these things. So that's what's really fun about it, as like A, working out with it, and B, training with it, right?
Yeah, I like what you said about the evolution too, because last night I was coaching class, and I was coaching people through the squat clean thruster, and there are people putting up weights that were like, if 2011, 2010, even 2008 when I started, 2007, 2008 would have been like ridiculously strong,
right,
like superhuman strength, and then now it's like it's becoming normal just in your everyday gym.
Yeah, because we're picking up on it. People are picking up to, like, we're understanding how to coach technique, understand skill, and then how to actually cross train that, right? So like if you're doing a clean, essentially, like how can you get you stronger without having to do cleans 4 or 5 times a week, right? Yeah. We can get these we understand the muscle groups we're using now because we understand the cross reference of the cross training. Whereas before it was like you could only do this, right? So we're gonna do a clean cycle where we clean 4 times a week. That sucks. Like, that used to be so boring.
Yeah.
But now we're like, we really don't need to do that much work, because it's like if we do a day of technique in 1 week, and then the next week we do volume, like, we can always counterbalance because we're still hitting these motions regularly throughout the week, right?
Yep, 100%. Well, that leads us perfectly into our meat and potatoes of this podcast. Now that we have some context, let's quickly define sport, and then we're going to get right into CrossFit's role in sport-specific training. So sport defined is an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment and points.
Great.
Yes, that was the definition that I found.
I mean, that's great. I mean, yeah, sport is just taking, like, essentially it's just taking the skill, like whatever the skill will be of anything, either as an individual or a team or some combination of therefore, and putting it out to test.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
Really. And it's such a variety, like wide variety of things. It's all encompassing, right?
Yeah. And the elements of CrossFit that align with sport are observable, measurable, and repeatable.
Yeah.
Let's get into CrossFit's role in sport-specific training. So CrossFit is extremely versatile as a training program because it can develop agility, strength, balance, speed, coordination, which are the baseline for the requirements for any sport as you move into the sport specificity of it.
Well, yeah, like the reason sport is at the top of the pyramid, right? It's the final piece of the puzzle, right? Leading up to this whole point, we've been working on getting you the athlete here, right? Mm-hmm. Via nutrition and like how important that's the base, and that's the first part of things, right? Either you have to gain muscle or lose weight, or you have to be healthy first off, right? And then you got to work your way up to the metabolic conditioning. So you got to have the endurance to go out and do it, right? Mm-hmm. You're a baseball player. I remember playing softball with you. Running to base, right? Like it's a short sprint, but that's your that's hard, man. Running center field or being outside, that ability to have the endurance, right? If you don't have that, but you have all the skills, you're never going to get on the field, right? Exactly. So that's right away. Like we got to work on that baseline.
Makes you just more durable too,
right?
Because the more conditioned I am, the more I can tolerate those bursts over and over again.
Right. Yeah. Like, I mean, I played soccer for a while and, I ran track for a long time, and you needed to have the endurance to get on the field, right? Before you could have the skill. Like we used to have to do running drills all the time and test. So that's one piece of it. And then the next part of the pendulum is like gymnastics, right? And really gymnastics is body weight in space. And if you think about that, if you talk about the agility aspect or the quick cuts or the stop and go style workouts, mm-hmm. right? That's where the gymnastics comes in. You need to strengthen your body weight in space and have control of that body weight in space, right?
Yeah, it's definitely an underrated skill.
It really is. That's why it's above the weightlifting skill, because you need to have the ability and the strength to move from side to side. I know, just going back to because we did the softball, we had an amazing softball team. You guys really missed it the few years we had.
I think we won 1 or 2 games total over the course of several years.
We don't need to brag, but as you go, you think about it, if I'm running bases, right? If I'm doing it's not even a quick turn when you round the base. It's just having the ability to shift your weight from one angle to another while adjusting. That is a sport specific workout, right? But doing pistol squats, doing air squats, doing lunges, right? Now I'm strengthening those pieces of my legs, which are still technically gymnastic pieces, right?
Right.
Doing pull-ups or overhead handstand holds, right? Now I'm strengthening my arm for throwing and having the durability that's going to last and be safe for my athlete throughout those pieces, right? So that's why that part is very important.
Yeah. And a big thing that stands out to me in terms of the laying this baseline for to lead into sport specific training is that the functional movements that CrossFit requires you to do, and also the combinations, and also, like we said earlier when we kind of gave context earlier about exposing you to other realms of fitness that you didn't really know of, that kind of exposes weaknesses.
Yeah.
And when you can fill those gaps and lay that general physical preparedness foundation before you move into sport specific training, the more you can handle your sport specific training and maximize your benefits from that sport specific training.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't even have to be sports. I mean, the reason CrossFit is so good with general, you hear it say GPP, general physical preparedness, you are moving your body around in different aspects. Like everyday life is like that too. If you're, if you just if you're at home, like I go to Costco and I buy food, right? I'm taking a box out of a cart, I'm putting it in my car, I'm taking that box out of my car, I'm carrying it into my house, I'm unloading that box. I've just did several different movements, right? If I'm severely under condition and I'm severely like weak inside my thing, that could actually be a very challenging aspect in my life, right? And so we need you to train those aspects for yourself. Yeah, sure, you may not be a baseball player or a basketball player right now who needs to cut from side to side, but picking up, let's just say a Costco box that's going to weigh about 35 to 40 pounds, right? Now I'm going low number here, right? You pick that sucker up and now you're holding it close to your body and you turn sideways. You just shifted your load from 2 feet to one side. So that's essentially like rounding the bases. You've done the same kind of movement. Boom, it's applicable to the NBA All-Star that just came in and worked out today, all the way to the soccer mom who's got to go to Costco the next day, right? Like, that's why it's general preparedness, right? It could be used for sport specific, it could be used for everyday life, but it correlates back and forth between the two. Yeah,
absolutely. And using CrossFit to lay that foundation first, and then moving in to that specific training. Let's say like you are an elite athlete, like a MLB baseball player, then CrossFit will be a great like off-season training for you to kind of just fill the gaps, keep you durable, and get you prepared. And then once you kind of have like somewhat of a baseline, we're not talking you need to be an elite CrossFitter here, but CrossFit exposing you to all these different fitness realms, and then you can move on to more like your speed and power training.
Yeah, and that's where it's good to, like, I would, when you get to the sports side of things, right, it's good to separate the two. There's CrossFit as a sport, and there's the sports for CrossFit, right? And like you're talking about, like if you're an amateur player, high school player, a college player, a pro player, right? The reason they like to do this is because when you're not in season, right, and you're training for your off season or you have downtime to train, you're training this way because it's a safe way to strengthen the muscles and ligaments and the movements patterns that you're going to be doing. So if you're a thrower, right, you can't throw every day, right? It's just going to, you probably shouldn't because you don't want to fatigue the shoulder that much, right? But we can do range of motion drills, we can do weightlifting drills that are safe and effective, right? I worked a lot with MMA fighters for a few years, right? And I worked a lot with their training and being their strength and conditioning coach and helping advise on things like that. And one of the things like watching is like you watch them do their positions, you watch them go into like throwing the punches, doing their kicks. You have to strengthen those muscles so they can get good power, but you also have to like strengthen their durability because they're throwing, in a training week, if they're, if it's MMA and they're doing UFC style fighting, they're probably throwing like 70 to 100 kicks minimum, throughout that, like through bag training, through shadow box, things like that. We have to protect that joint and ligament so A, it still has power, and B, it can still be durable enough to, get them to the next fight, right? Because that's their moneymaker. So we don't want to injure that as we go into some of the training aspects of it, right?
Yeah, and one of the most common mistakes I see with younger athletes, and also something that I saw specifically with myself when I was kind of getting more exposed to the weight room, is that everybody wanted to go straight into sports specific training. We're talking like agility, speed, and then so we were skipping all these steps before, when I really wish if I could go back in time that I would lay a foundation first by getting my nutrition dialed in, then doing metabolic conditioning with some lifting, and then lifting. I definitely wish that I did my compound and functional movements earlier, because that would have made my speed training and my power training that much more effective and efficient, because to be honest with you, I didn't have enough muscle mass to even generate as much power as I should have. So I should have focused more, especially as a young athlete, I should have focused more on getting stronger, getting conditioned, laying a foundation for my body. And then when I got older, then I should have moved straight into sport specific training. Yeah. I see this all the time with parents too, when sometimes I'll get contacted by young athletes, 10, 12, and they're like, well, I want my son or my daughter to be faster and I want speed training. I'm like, well, and then I look at them, I'm like, well, first off, they don't have a ton of muscle. They're either really skinny or they're somewhat overweight. Like, we need to build a fitness foundation first, because they're so young that just by doing this stuff, we're going to set them up for success for their sport specific stuff later.
Yeah, but that's a good point. Like, take you, for example, you probably would have benefited from more power type movements, right? Like deadlifting or squatting.
Yes, 100%.
Right? Versus more dynamic movements, right? Like hang cleans or like med ball slams or things like that, where we kind of skip, and we go like into the agility drill, we go into the power things because we're like, we need more explosiveness, right? It's like you lack the muscle content to give explosiveness right now, so you actually should take a step back and build the muscle through these other pieces, right? And same with kids too. I see a lot with kids when they come in. I'm always like, well, how's their coordination? They're fine, they're kids. I'm like, they can't run in a straight line. I mean, yeah, they're fast. They can run hard because you're young. You don't know. Yeah. Right. Where we could work on coordination drills first right away, and then work through your power, and through those things we can actually generate speed from the kids. Right. It's a fine line to walk when you go into like these specifics, because it's hard to tell someone to take a step back and like, don't do this when you've been taught to do these things. And that's another issue too, is some people who are working with, these kids or, college teams or things like that, they're very stuck in a rut that they want to do. Yeah. They're very stuck in like, oh, it's got to be black and white. Yeah. There's no gray.
And it's such short-term thinking too. It's like, what kind of training can I do right like now that will, it will benefit them, but what will benefit you in 5 to 10 years down the road?
I always tell people this. I was like, if I gave you $5 right now, would that benefit you? Yes. Right? 5 is better than 0. But if I said, hey, over the next, and I just gave it to you for like the next 10 days, right? But if I said, hey, over the next 50 days, I'll give you $1 a day. Well, that is more beneficial over the long term if I could do it, right? It's the same as weightlifting, or same as any kind of program. Yeah, there's initial inherent benefit you can get today from doing something. It's super sexy and fun. You're right, because it's better than nothing.
Yes.
But if I gave you the long-term process of going through it, right, it's more beneficial over this long-term process if you put your mind into it. Yeah. It's the best way to think about it, because it's hard to see that up front. Yeah. Right? You're like, $1 a day, that's stupid. Well, over 50 days, that's $50. That's more than $5. It's not that stupid, but it's hard to get that concept in your head as someone's pitching it to you right away.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's move on to the sport of CrossFit now. Yeah, sorry, I had to look at my notes. Yeah, CrossFit. All right, let's dig into this now. Any final thoughts you want to wrap up from using CrossFit towards other sports?
No, I think that pretty much covered it. That's really what they mean by the sport when they put it on the top of the hierarchy, was having it like that. I think the next pieces will go right into the sport of CrossFit.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so we're going to dive into CrossFit's transition from just a regular gym routine to a competitive sport. And this is where something I think that CrossFit kind of messed up, because I think that there's a general consensus where some people look at the CrossFit games and they assume that that's what we do every day in just a normal CrossFit gym with just normal moms and dads, and just regular people, which we don't. And then unfortunately that it's blended too much to where that's what people think that they're going to do. Because I've had plenty of people message me and be like, well, I don't want to do CrossFit because of what I see on YouTube and TV. Because most of what you see out there on social media and on YouTube or TV, whatever, on ESPN is all the competitive, like, I train 4, 5, 6 hours a day kind of CrossFitters.
Yeah, this is a slippery slope to go down here, I'll tell you that. Yeah, I like it. There's an aspect of sport, right? Inherently, as human beings, we are competitive with one another, right? So we need to, if you're going to have something that's measurable and observable, it's only natural to have something that is challenging and going to be competitive for everybody, right? They flipped it. It's really developed, and it's fun to have watched it develop over the last few years. Oh yeah, right. from the time I've started to the time it is to where it is now, like, oh man, it's night and day. But with the, again, it's a sport. And what makes this so different, and I think what's hard for people to grasp, is like the people you see on TV, that's like watching NFL players play, like on Thursday or Monday night.
Yeah, it's not flag football.
Yeah, they're professional athletes who play, who got drafted, like who have the skill, ability, and wherewithal to go out and do it. Now, we get to do the same things they do, and it's good because we get to compare them, which that's what makes things separate from other sports, right? Mm-hmm. If I watch NBA basketball and I go out and try to play pickup and I try to do some of the dunks or shots, I just don't have the skill or ability to do it, right? It's just kind of the difference. But the biggest thing here is that we get to do it in a very casual setting, and then we can actually do it with those people, right? Mm-hmm. Like they can drop in and work out with you, and it's like you're like, oh my God, these guys are amazing, right? But it tricks us, right? And it lures us in to think, I can do that. Well, it's not so hard, right?
They make it look easy.
Right. They make it look, but so does like any professional player.
Any professional who dedicates their life towards a sport is going to make it look, and if they don't make it look easy, they wouldn't be the professional that they are.
Yeah. And like the World Series just went down, right? And you're watching them throw pitches and you're like, I could throw a 99-mile fastball. Cool. That's one pitch. This guy has like 10 pitches he can throw, and he can throw them all at 9.
And he does this consistently.
And he looks
years.
Yeah, he looks easy, right? But but you don't hear that same thing. So that's kind of the first problem with it. And people kind of see these things on TV and they assume that you're doing kind of this, like, oh, I don't want to do that. And like, yeah, you couldn't do that. We don't want you to do that, right? Like, that's not the purpose of it. It's the chaining methodology, like, so it is separate. So like the affiliates we're here to preach the methodology. We're here to preach the system. We're here to help you get fit inside of it. The games is kind of our top 1% showing off of like, this is the tip of the spear. Yes, you could go here if you wanted to, but it would take so much to get you there.
Yeah, exactly. Right? It's kind of like the Blue Angels. It's like, just because you fly on an airliner for vacation doesn't mean you're going to turn into a Blue Angel or a NASCAR driver.
Anywhere else, like there's such a separation in anything else. But when you get out here, even powerlifting, right? Like you watch the guys at the Arnold Classic just go down and they're deadlifting 1,000 pounds. I've never had once someone go, I could do that. Yeah. They've all been like, that's just crazy. But you watch the CrossFit Games and you watch an event where they do like sled pushes and bring muscle ups and you're like, I could do that. That's so easy. That's not even hard. I'm like, cool. That's event 7 on day 2 and they have 3 more days to go. I don't think you can do that.
No, totally. And as someone, I've competed many times, semi-professionally. I've never made it to the CrossFit Games back in the day, but I have gone to regionals a few times. And
count it.
And I remember all the training for it, and it's definitely something that you can sustain for the rest of your life. It's definitely fun. Like, don't get me wrong. Like I used to love competing. I love competitive CrossFit. Yeah. And then priorities just change because life changes, right? And then, everyone will eventually go down that path, even those who are competitive. But the great thing about being competitive was that it really built a huge fitness foundation for me for now later on in life. Because now where I'm at now, it's a lot easier for me to maintain my fitness because I built such a huge base in my 20s when I was competing.
Yeah, it's just separates it out. Like, you could compete and competition does keep going well into people's 60s, right? So if you want it, you can go do it and you'll find things around it, but there's challenges that come out at every age group, right? I do feel like that's the piece of sport. The other aspect of sport that I think needs to be kind of talked about too is, we look at it and there is a finite way of understanding how to read sport as we work out, right? And what I mean by that is these guys inherently can work through pacing strategies and understand when to push, when not to push. They know when to inherently hold certain strategies that they go through. They know how to do like, okay, I'm going to go unbroken on this round, but I'm actually going to break this movement up. And they can understand this. So like there's actually some skill to the sport of CrossFit that goes into it that could be applied down low to where we're at now, right? 100%. To everyone. So I do think that is part of a skill like that there's part of the sport thing. So like when we talk about like, sure, we're not throwing a baseball, we're not throwing a football, we're not tackling somebody, we're not having to juke side to side, right? And I think those are aspects we think about as skill, but like when you get to the top pyramid of sport, there are understanding your body metrics that can help you out. And I mean, that is like, okay, I know I need to like, pace this piece, pace that, like understand pacing and timing, things like that, and when not to and when to, right? Or else what could happen to myself versus I'm just going head down, hard as I can, 24/7, right?
Right.
So that is one aspect of sport that we could apply back down to the general population with the rest of us, right? That we look at, that's our skill base that we go through, right? And then the other flip side of sport I would throw in there is like, there's a reason CrossFit says this all the time, and they've said it since 2007. You should regularly play other sports and try new things.
Yeah.
Right.
100%. That's a great point.
And they always throw that piece out there. And I always want to like cap that piece in there because a lot of the people that you see who are in the CrossFit games now came from somewhere else originally.
Yes.
When we're just now getting to where we're growing CrossFit athletes in this like last, like, I think 3 or 4 years that grew up doing CrossFit and like came, but most people came from a sport, right? Like football, baseball, basketball, 100%. Swimming, you name it. They probably came from a sport where and then they decided to come over and just do this sport. Like they were probably like, Cole Sager was a really good college football player. He wasn't like amazing, but he was a really good college football player who came over and it was even better at CrossFit. So his transition was really easy and seamless for him, right? And so like that's a good example there. Rich Froning is kind of my example I always go back to because he played sports a lot. He was really good at CrossFit, and then he went back and he's really good at other sports. Yeah. So he's pretty fit.
Yeah, I think he's doing like mountain biking now.
He just did the Leadville 150 and finished it, which was it's one of the hardest races in the world.
Yeah, it's really cool to see some of these OG CrossFitters starting to branch out into other sports. Like I think I saw another one do an Ironman. Yeah. I can't remember who it was, but she completed her first Ironman after being a games athlete for several years.
I mean, it's hundreds of them, right? Like, I mean, it's a good way to point this out though. Like you're coming from other sports and you're doing, so they weren't just like rolled in as children at 3 years old and only doing weightlifting and only doing CrossFit. Like they played other sports. They messed around. They did other things. They actually went through, I mean, Sydney Wells was a sprinter until this last year, and now she's a full-time CrossFit athlete. Yeah. So, I mean, it happens all the time. So I keep that in mind. Like you may not know where your niche is. You may have to take time to get there. So you should regularly be doing other things too, to find out different skills, different abilities, different weaknesses, and then coming back and training them in the gym. Yeah,
I think that's a good place to where we can kind of wrap things up and make this our final point, is to regularly learn and play new sports, because that's the whole beauty of CrossFit. CrossFit is there to lay a fitness foundation, and then once you have that fitness foundation, it's time to kind of branch out and challenge yourself in other ways.
Yeah, agreed.
That's awesome. Nailed it right there. Any final thoughts you want to wrap things up on, Danny?
No.
That sounds great. Alrighty, everybody. So do a quick summary of everything we talked about in the podcast. So first off, we talked about the roots of CrossFit and how CrossFit was originally designed as a general physical preparedness program. And that's exactly what it still is to this day. And that's what we focus on in the CrossFit affiliates and at my gym as well. Our goal here is just to give you a most balanced baseline of fitness as possible. And then from there, you can move on to something sports specific or start enjoying fitness realms outside of the gym, and whether that be competing in CrossFit or going on a hike or just exposing yourself to something new, it's definitely a great way to stay active and keep things fresh, which is keep things fun and not boring, because as we know, it's really easy to fall into a routine with fitness, and the whole goal of CrossFit is to give you exposure to different fitness realms. Danny, anything else?
Nope, that sounds about a good place to call it quits.
I love it. Yep. Well, great podcast, buddy. It was great wrapping this Hierarchy of CrossFit podcast series up with you. And thank you so much for listening. If this was helpful, please leave us a 5-star review so we know to make more content just like this. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Red Wolf CrossFit and DM your questions or content suggestions there. We're always looking for new topics. Until next time, good luck. Have fun. Nailed it.